Hey there, guys. Happy Monday to you. It's your boy Choppadong, and we're going to come at you with a two-tight player pool for Monday, June 6th. Main slate. We'll do Fanduel and Draftkings again. It just doesn't take too terribly long. The idea behind the two-tight player pool, if this is your first time joining in, is to generate a 20 to 25 player pool of MLB DFSers that we can focus on. Guys that are consistent, guys that hit near the top of the order, guys that are in decent matchups. And we use the ownership projections to find those because everybody sees the same thing. Everybody has access to a lot of similar data these days. And because of that, everybody kind of heads down the same pathway to the same players. So we can save ourselves some time, not worry as much about digging too deep into the numbers anymore, and be right there on the right track with everybody else if we just use those ownership numbers. Cash games versus tournaments. Cash games are not the type of place that you want to take a bunch of risk and take a bunch of leverage. So it's okay to hide inside those ownership numbers and use those highly owned chalky players. Tournaments, yes, that's where we talk about pivots. That's where we talk about risk. Why? The reward is there in tournaments. We get paid 10 times, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 times our buy-in on those lineups because of the top heavy nature and the pay structure of those tournament contests. Cash games are a different beast. Cash games only pay us about double or triple our money, and it pays 50 out of 100 people the same, meaning we just don't need to win that contest because the reward is not there for the level of risk that we're taking to accomplish winning that contest. So anywhere in the middle, 18th place, fine. 35th place, fine. 42nd place, fine. You did your job, we move on. That's why the ownership methodology works so well. Also, it helps to build those cash game lineups first because then you see where all that ownership is going, and now you can see what's being missed. You can see what's being forgotten, and then use that in your tournament build. So it all goes hand in hand. It all forms an overall picture, again, investment portfolio, if you will, in what you're trying to accomplish when you're trying to build a bankroll or possibly set yourself up for big time success. If you wonder who I am, my name is Choppadong. I'm a coach and contributor inside DFSArmy.com. Been here for years, sort of an OG. I like to help the beginners get the leaks plugged in their game and get them pushed to the intermediate and advanced levels of DFS play. So a lot of people will start with me when they become members. We'll talk a lot. We'll fix some of those obvious leaks, explain to you the whys, and then people will start moving on, doing their own thing, adding their own nuances to the systems that they learn as they become members. If that interests you, DFS Army is the coupon code you want to use for a 10% off discount, and the VIP tier unlocks everything, including the chat, access to me, the other coaches, all our tools, all our cheat sheets, and everything else. So obviously, I would encourage you to jump in, at least give us a 30-day shot. Looking at the free trial offers up here at the top of the page, some of those partnered offers are offering deposit matches and free offers. But while we're talking about that, let's go ahead and show you the two-tight player pool methodology, because this is simple. You can do this anywhere, anytime, as long as you have ownership projections loaded into your optimizers of choice. I like to build 5 lineups because I'm really just trying to get an idea of how the players kind of are mixing together. I like to use optimal mode. I save tournament mode for tournaments, obviously, and use 2 to 3 unique players. You don't need to use a ton of unique players because you're just not going to have a lot of players that you're pulling from with this methodology anyway. We're not using any of the other bells and whistles on this page. We just don't need to worry about anything at all. I'm trying to also limit, because I don't want to be too boom or bust. I want to be more consistent. I don't want the ups and the downs, the violent swings. So I try to limit my lineups to about 3 bats from the same team, because otherwise I'm depending way too much on a single offense. And in baseball, offenses let us down all the time. So I don't do any intentional stacking in my cash game, two-tight player pool type of stuff. And once I've got all of these guys loaded up to the top, just click in the column, bringing all these guys up to the top, I uncheck everybody. And then I move position by position and check back the more popular plays. When I see big gaps in these ownerships, I can kind of break it off right there and say Blake Snell is probably the cash game pitcher tonight. If he has a bad game, he hurts 35 out of 100 people. If he has a good game, you're taking a risk by not having him when you're only trying to get into the top half or top 50 of a contest, you just don't need to take that level of risk by getting goofy. Now, it doesn't always work that way. There's such a thing as bad chalk, but that doesn't usually happen at the pitcher spot. That usually happens with bats. So we can pretty much leave this one alone. We don't need Hunter Green, Robbie Ray, Christian Javier, or whatever. We can save those guys for tournaments, save those guys for, our little pivot plays and our leverage plays and all that stuff you hear people talking about all the time. And right now for our cash games, we can leave just Blake Snell in there. We really don't need catchers when they're combined on Fanduel. We do on Draftkings, of course. When guys are up here in 16 to 23% land, we really don't need them. Because again, they're just not being owned enough. We can include them when they're close, but I'm not going 10% or under. Just don't need to. Most of the time, I've got 5 guys for that position selected as of right now. That's plenty. We usually like to keep it to 3 guys or so because we just want a couple of choices. A cheap option, an expensive option, whatever. I'm not using Matt Duffy at 10%, but if he does lead off for LA, he's definitely a play at $2,200. Optimizers like him, giving him a lot of fantasy points per dollar. So he makes sense, but right now he's not garnering enough ownership that I'm going to just latch onto him. I'm going to stick with Brandon Drury, Ketel Marte, maybe Jose Altuve. He's a great cash play night in and night out. A lot of times Marcus Semien is too, but he falls a little bit off the map in that ownership category tonight for me to think that he's going to hurt me. If he has a great game, so be it. 13 out of 100 people had a great game, and that's great. You might want to be one of those guys, but all I need is a decent game out of any of these other guys, and I'm just fine. Third base, Jose Ramirez, great cash game play usually. Josh Rojas, a little bit on the cheaper side, which is fine. Rafael Devers is okay, and then we can get down to the Chapmans and Duffys and not worry about it so much. Shortstop, Bichette looks like the chalk. Corey Seager is garnering 20% ownership, and then a big drop-off down here, so I just don't need a lot of shortstops tonight, right? It's just the way that things shuffle. They're different every night. Varsho, Springer, Trout, of course, is almost always playable. Ohtani's interesting. You can look at his game logs. He can be an up-and-down player, but when you're looking at those game logs, you also need to look at this ownership. If 25% of the people have him and he has a big game, it's not going to hurt my chances completely, but it is going to hurt them a little bit in getting into the cash game. So being that he's a popular player, he's okay to take. So you can. He also justifies. He's kind of right in the middle. He also justifies. You could leave him alone tonight as well. Tommy Pham. I don't know how I feel about him. I haven't seen his game logs for a while. When I'm looking at those game logs, I click on the player. I look at his last 10 or 12 games, and I want to see a guy who's bringing me somewhere in this 3 to 4 times value range. Depends on his salary. The cheaper he is, the less he has to do. But if the guy's getting me somewhere between 6, 9, and 12 points with the occasional 25 or 30-point outburst, I love that guy when he's doing it 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 times. It means he's swinging a hot bat and he's performing. When he posts a bunch of zeros or threes or whatever, he's not really helping me in cash games. So if he's got a lot of those in his last 10 games, 4, 5, 6 times, so he's posting a zero, I'm going to uncheck that guy. Tommy Pham feels about like that guy. David Peralta, however, has been hot lately, so I'm going to check him in. And that may have changed. Again, I have not looked at game logs yet today, but my lean would be Pham out, Peralta in, and then just leave it alone. I've got, 21 players, which is what I've said we typically use. Optimize it for 5 lineups, and let's see how things shuffle out. Of course, we've got Blake Snell locked in at 100%, using a lot of Corey Seager, Mike Trout, Dalton Varsho as well, and then everybody else mixes in. So this would be your core of players that you're building around. And I'm looking here again for no more than 3. So I've got 3 Arizona bats. That's about the limit. Everybody else seems okay. That lineup's fine. There's only 2 bats with 2 Toronto bats. That's also fine. Salvi Perez used one of those catchers. 1, 2, 3, and 2. 1, 2, 3, and 3 Toronto bats. You're getting a little heavy on Toronto and Arizona when you're doing that, but you're not so overly committed that it becomes problematic. Any of those lineups are producing pretty solid-looking cash game lineups, and they should be very, very commonly shared players top to bottom over on Fanduel. Now, on Draftkings, sometimes things change. You have to use those pitchers, 2 pitchers, quite a bit. So we need to do the same thing. We need to get into 5 lineups, 2 to 3 unique players, no randomness, no nothing else. And we bring those ownerships up to the top, we uncheck everybody, and we start going position by position. See, now Blake Snell is obviously the cash game play, but then who are you going to mix him with? Probably one of those Hunter Green, Christian Javier, Robbie Ray types, just like we saw over on FanDuel. I might not need Noah Syndergaard or John Gray. We can save those guys for tournaments once again. And now I dive into the catcher spot, and I see Varsho, because I have to use a catcher. I could probably stop just there, but if I want to include a couple of other options just for sake of not using too many on one team, then I could probably include these other two guys just down the list. Vladimir Guerrero looks like he's going to be chalky over there. Otani, all of a sudden. There's Votto, Pavin Smith, Matt Duffy, Christian Walker, and then we got to drop down to 8%. Ketel Marte, Brandon Drury, Espino, Jose Altuve, a little bit of a drop, not too bad, but we probably don't need Marcus Semien. If you want to include him, that's fine. Josh Rojas, Jose Ramirez, Matt Chapman starting to pull some ownership. Devers is up there, and then a big drop from 11% down to 5%. These guys down here won't factor into cash games at all. Bo Bichette, Corey Seager, and then nothing, right? See the drop? George Springer, Teoscar Hernandez. Looks like shortstop's a pretty interesting position tonight because you can go into shortstop or position scarcity type mentalities. It's enough of those guys. And we got a 30-person player pool. One thing I will do is I will knock some of these guys down just a little bit so that I can adjust and run the optimizer without making those two edits. The optimizer oftentimes won't run. And now I can look again at, there's a lot of guys that are the same, and then a few that are mixing in. So these lineups are going to look very, very similar. It looks going to be Toronto heavy. 4 bats is a little bit over my limit, but it isn't the worst thing in the world with the lack of options. There's 3 bats, which is a little bit better. For a cash game scenario, there's 3 bats there, which is a little bit better. That was only 3 lineups. If I wanted to build 5, I guess I have to change that. I thought I did. And we'll do that again. So what I was getting ready to say before in terms of where all these guys land just completely left my mind. I apologize. You'll have to come back for another video probably to listen to that thought if it re-enters my brain. But there's the 4 bats again. There's 3 Toronto bats. It's interesting. A little bit of a shuffle. It liked something a little bit different making those 5 lineups. There's 3 and 3. There's 4 bats again. So again, you're getting right up there. I would choose something that's a little bit less stacked than a full 4 bats because again, I just want to spread my offenses out a little bit so I'm not too dependent in a cash game. I can have an average score and win. It's nice to have a high score. It's nice to be up towards the top of those contests, but it's not necessary to win. It certainly doesn't pay you any better. And most importantly, it actually adds volatility because as you're trying to get to the top, you're going to miss and go straight to the bottom in a lot of cases. If you play a little bit closer to the vest, play a little bit safer, you land in the middle more often. And in these contests, these 50-50s, double ups and whatever, the middle pays. That's what pays. You want to hit these things more than 50% of the time. Right now, the past, month and a half or so, we've been tracking our own cash game records, and our cash game record is 28-14. So we're winning at a 2-to-1 clip, and this methodology is producing just fine. So if you're struggling and you're trying to get better, you're trying to learn the fundamentals, I encourage you to become a DFS Army VIP. I encourage you to come and look me up in the beginner's room, the MLB room, wherever. Talk to me. We'll make some videos. We'll talk back and forth, and we'll get your game fixed, and we'll get you turned around. We just had another member today post a very, very interesting comment that I will show you. He mentioned that he is up 110 times his initial deposit amount because of the coaching he's received at dfsarmy.com. He's not hit any big 5-figure $10,000 wins or any of that stuff, but he is slowly building a bankroll that is generally amounting to something now. He feels obviously very, very good about his position where he's been, and it's because he's taking the coaching to heart and he's listening to the fundamentals that we have to say, and he's turned his game completely around. Hopefully that's you. If it's not you, hopefully it can become you. But the first step relies on you taking that leap of faith on yourself, using that coupon code DFS Army, and getting in here and starting to play like a VIP. We can certainly help you do that. Hopefully you guys have some good luck out there tonight, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.